understanding your impact, and it's really a guide to CCF's evaluation process. So it's going to be less about wider impact reports, although some of that will be able to be used. It's really an insight to what we have been noticing, I suppose, when it comes to our end of grant reporting, and how we can perhaps make that process richer for yourselves and for us as a funder as well. So it's nice to just have that funder perspective on things. More generally, because I know we've got a few here that perhaps haven't applied with CCF before and want to know a little bit more, got some nodding heads, that's fab. So in a nutshell, we are a small grant giving charity established in 2003, and we're accredited with something called the UKCF, so the UK Community Foundations, that have 47 community foundations within their networks. They all are on that same vein, but work slightly differently. So I always describe it as we're very much like a hub for lots of different funds to then be able to stay in that locality. So we are Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly. Devon will have a community foundation, Somerset and so. And it's just bringing together lots of different funds. So over 70 different funds are in our remit. That may be an established fund that we then facilitate. It may be a fund that we've created. So with Jerry talking about different donors coming into different causes, they may be funds that we've created. Some are locational, which are really good because then you don't have to be a certain type of group. Are you benefiting that location? Some are thematic, so it might be a different type of beneficiary or a certain cause that you're going for. And we do have a few individual funds, some for hardship, where you can distribute money to individuals in crisis. So there's lots of different funds. They all work in different ways. Some are on deadlines. So often our funds on available grants are those that are actually on a deadline basis. And then there's far more that sort of trickle underneath. And as and when we have conversations, it becomes a bit matchmakery, I suppose. So always get in touch, create that partnership with us to find out what funding we actually have. And then the idea of that funding is we want to make it as accessible as possible. We're small grants that often make that biggest difference to those really on the ground community groups. You don't have to be a charity to work with us. You don't have to be ICIC. You can be a constituted community group. So within that documentation, we require a governing document, that may be a constitution, 3 unrelated committee members, all your details are registered where they need to be, a safeguarding policy, that's for all, no matter if you're working with children or not, a bank account and an end of year accounts really, and a bank statement. Of course, there's some things we can't support because we have been set up as a charity, so things such as statutory or public sector organisations. For example, we can't work directly with schools, but we can work with PTAs. So there's ways that we can help, but of course we were set up as a charity, so we weren't set up to fund things that should be statutory, and work not benefiting people living in Cornwall. Whenever people ask me who can apply, I just think, right, focus on the Cornwall community part, and then you should be ready to go. To make it accessible, our process is a 1-stage online application form. And what will happen is it then gets sent to some of our grants officers that all are responsible for different funds. Either they will assess it or external assessors that we work with. And what we always pride ourselves on is we will always ask additional questions if needed. There's nothing worse if you've made a slight mistake or not mentioned something and you get put straight in the no pile and you think, if only they'd asked me, I could have clarified. So we always pride ourselves on that we will ask those further questions, and it will just be a simple email, here's my questions, reply to the email, or when would be a good time for a quick phone call. And then what that allows us to do is then we create an assessor's comments of what we would recommend based on what we feel about the application form. And it's ultimately not ourselves that then make that decision. It will either be sent to the fund holder or it will go to a panel in most cases, and then local experts that will then make that decision. So we're placing ourselves in the best way to be able to represent you. And one thing that then is important in that process is usually if your project's about a year, at the end we ask for an end of grant report. And And that's really important, because without an end of grant report completed, if your project's complete, we can't really then allow you to reapply to something, because we haven't known what you've spent the money on and how you've done it in a previous project. So it's a really important piece, because then once you've done that, there's no limit to how many of our funds you can apply to. But if you've got that strike against your name, has not completed end of grant report, still awaiting it, then you're a bit stuck. So I really wanted to do a session on that side of things today, to see what we're looking for. I've asked a quick question there. What is a monitoring and evaluation form? Tap in the chat sort of what maybe it, more so what it means to you. If someone said, here's your monitoring and evaluation form, fill it in. What's going through your head? Interesting to me there is, when a lot of us had a pre-talk to begin with, a lot of people mentioned storytelling, and now it's become far more gathering data, check, figures, impacts. And I suppose that's exactly what I would think, that, okay, monitoring and evaluation, they're going to check we've done everything we said and tick that box. And I suppose we're wanting to move away from that sort of term monitoring and making sure that you're this looming funder that's made sure you've done exactly as you said you would, and more towards storytelling. So have a quick look, scan, have a look through. Which do you feel, I suppose, is stronger as a passage that you would put in your impact report? Hooray! Yes, I would agree. The first one is stronger. And I sort of wanted to start with that, because automatically sometimes you see the longer passage and you think that must be it, because there's so much more detail in it. And really wanted to start off with that focus that end of grant reporting and impact reporting shouldn't feel like this arduous, long, detailed process, because actually there's more words written on that right side and it tells me far less. So actually this process doesn't have to be essays and essays of writing. Quality over quantity, I think, all the time. There isn't very much certainty in anything that we've written about Sam. It's all very loose. This is a completely made up one. Doesn't really tell me much about anything, really. And of course, the focus on the left is that individual story, that individual voice, concise and straight to the point. There is certainty within that. There are different things that could add to it. Just wanted to make that clear. It doesn't have to be an essay. And that's where we really want to take this term monitoring and it being a tick exercise to try and prove to the funder that you did what was told, and you can tick that box, and it's just something you have to get done, to very much being that opportunity to tell your story and, yeah, really pass on that process that this is the difference and impact that you've made. So we're going on storytelling. And I think the reason we've really focused on that is, at the moment, we are beginning to get a lot of end of grant reports that do feel a bit like oh, this is a process, I've just got to get it done. And it's not as strong as it could be for ourselves and for you to be able to tell that story, to gain more interest in your group, to advertise to other funders and things like that. So that is the key today, focus on storytelling. I'm probably going to go through each of these points. So look at a greater look of that story of change. I think that's the most impactful part of any impact reporting. No matter what it is, who it's for, often that story of change is the most important. Things around photography. We know we support so many groups and we often don't get many photos, or photos that really shine. So some tips around that. And then that sort of impact collection process. and how it can embed throughout your whole project. There's nothing worse when that end of grant report comes in and you think, oh no, what did we actually do? How did it work? We haven't been collecting anything throughout, or we've done it a bit right at the end because we know it's something we're meant to do. So that's sort of our vein for today. So, story of change. Often case studies can help show other funders and prospective donors how your project has made a difference. We love them because it allows us to see your stories come to life and how organisations like you are using our funding. Yes, there's importance to figures and facts, but that real heart of your project or your organisation is through the people and beneficiaries that you help. So, having a closer look at this first example we looked at, a lot of us mentioned that voice, that direct quotation. Anything else in the chat that you sort of think, oh, I liked that part, or oh, that could be a bit stronger, or I would change this. Just anything that comes to mind really as you're reading. Pop it in the chat and we'll have a little look through. And I thought this important to use because this is a story of change we have received. Fantastic, Emma. Yeah, it's very clear on impact and the changes that have occurred due to attending the hub. But a few more smart details, but as a story, including how long she's been going to the hub, would strengthen. I like it. I'll go through once we've had a few through. Always feels that pressure to type quickly, doesn't it? Fab. The act she has had the confidence to write a book increases the impact even further. I see it as a positive as a whole. I hear Jay's voice and there's fact. Fab. That's it. There are certainly many strengths to this, and more so where we want, we as funders would really like that story of change to go. The first, very obvious, is that direct quotes, that first-hand voice. As Mandy was saying, yeah, you can almost really hear Jay's voice. That since coming to the hub, I've made amazing friends. I'm also going out more, so you can really see that concrete evidence, but it's not a statistical evidence. Maybe a bit more detail about what she did at the hubs. I would agree exactly that. We have a snapshot, I would say, of who Jay was or is or was before. But that could be extended even further to really create that before image, to then show a real story of change. That's setting the scene almost. And yes, I also agree with, Becky, actually maybe telling a bit more of that middle part of what Jay did, what she attended, and yeah, how she accessed support. Another point to make, I suppose, that they've done well is around that consent, anonymising the individual or changing the name individual can easily be done. And I really wanted to point out as well something about ethical storytelling. It's very easy when discussing impact, really painting that bleak picture, and showing how tough these moments have been, but actually sharing people's stories in a way that respects their dignity, protects their safety, and honours their agency. Especially important in charity work where people's lived experiences can be personal, sensitive, or traumatic. I really think this makes a nice, empowering sort of state to this individual, and showing the impact. A couple more to have a see through. I'll be sending these slides afterwards so you can have an explore. But again, some of these have that lived experience, real voice. The one at the bottom I thought was interesting because it actually is from a parent. So if you are working with people that actually it wouldn't be appropriate or the best way to have that beneficiary directly communicate, there's other ways to go around it. And the first one gives a little bit more detail of that middle part of what they actually attended. So my advice, I suppose, is that structure for me helps me. Okay, right, I'm going to do this, and then that. And something that was in that first example we used, there wasn't too much structure to it, and the structure was all convoluted. So I would suggest at the beginning, it's really that setting the scene, introducing the beneficiary. What was their situation before they engaged in the project, and not making it so doom and gloom, I suppose. Describe their challenges, needs, or circumstances. Really get that snapshot of the start, giving enough context so readers can understand why the support was needed, but not so much context that it's becoming that essay. That way you're really able to show the journey and not just the final result. In that middle, what happened during the project? So explain what activities, sessions, or support the beneficiaries took place in. What did they actually access? And in that, actually describe that process. What skills did they gain? How did their behaviours change? How did their confidence build? And throughout, always linking that process to actually what your aims and objectives are. How did it link? It's not, if you're aiming to develop someone's confidence and you start telling me that they ate healthier, then, you know, that's a great thing, but how does it link to your outcomes? What I wanted to highlight here is because it can become very easy to paint with a brush that this all worked perfectly and it was all fantastic. We know that's not realistic. Things can happen and things work differently than you were expecting. And actually being transparent about any barriers or setbacks really helps show the realism and honesty. It shows to us as a funder that you are really set forth of how can we improve our services. You're looking to develop. It's a hard thing to think, actually, if I tell a funder that something worked in a different way we were expecting, that's it. I'm crossed off the list. It didn't go perfectly. But actually showing that honesty and what you learnt from that and how you might develop that the next time or change is just showing that real commitment to your cause and making it the best you can for your beneficiaries. Again, showing that journey, not just the result. And then the end, what has changed and what comes next, summarising that key outcomes, benefits to the beneficiary, and how they've experienced it. And I would be using direct quotations to bring the story to life at any point in that time. A lot of people will use at the end point because it's quite nice to grasp the positive outcomes that have come from that. But actually, could you be putting a direct quotation from how they were at the beginning, that first initial part of their process, how they're feeling in that midpoint? So you've got some indicators of their journey as well. That helps. Some top tips. really embedding that you're thinking about the themes and intended outcomes of your project. It will really keep it focused. We'll talk about that a bit later when we go on to how you're collecting that impact, but have that throughout. Using a real life story to help the reader relate. It's my biggest one. That real life story is just going to take the words off the paper. And how that is placed is up to you. You could do one longer case study. That's what we've looked at there, one individual. You could have a number of shorter case studies. It could be a case study that has a few individuals involved. And again, remembering that consent sort of side, remember to anonymise or change the name if they are vulnerable. A lot of the time, people we work with in the sector are vulnerable. So just being aware of that as well. Aware that I'm whistle stop touring, but it's something for you to then go back and look at, and we can chat through at the end. So photography is that big one. I am no photography expert, and I don't think many of us are in this sector. You know, that's very much an additional thing to do. And so can feel very, well, I don't have the latest gadget to be able to do that, and I don't know what I'm doing, but just wanted to share some things that I have seen that I think are quite useful and what we'd like to see as a funder. So people connect with people. So take photos that put people at the centre. A picture tells 1,000 words. To be able to see the people that you are helping and the beneficiaries is fantastic. Take photos that tell a story. Just having someone's face and it's not telling me anything. Again, that flatter people and highlight their strengths, all around that ethical storytelling, that we want to see empowerment and people's strengths rather than that doom and gloom, showing someone's weakness. Show context for what is happening in the background and the activity going on. Obviously not to the point that it feels so busy, but being able to just see something in a corner or someone doing something just piques the interest. You can share several photos to show different aspects of your project. There's no real limits for how many photos we ask for, as long as they're all telling different things. Because sometimes one photo isn't enough. Make sure the photos are clear, in focus, and have high resolution. So my smartphone isn't of the highest resolution and doesn't sometimes take the highest quality photos, but I know what sort of landscape it does work better in. It's a lot better in outside photography than it is inside or with something that's far more daylight. So I just get to know your camera, your phone. Try to share photos with bright colours and good lighting. That's when I often try and use as much natural light as I can. Because I think any sort of equipment, when it's a very dark space, always struggles. Avoid adding filters and too much editing. At the end of the day, that's also more time costly for yourselves. And that obtain informed consent. So focus on people, tell your story through the context, and show people's strengths. Here's some examples. We've got Whole Again Communities and St. Petrox. Even though this first photo is of the individuals standing, there's so much context around it, the aprons, what's going on around, and actually the different emotions. I think you can really see these people's stories within each their individualness. And again, with St. Petrox, they're getting on with activities, but it's all empowering. It makes me smile when I see the photos. I'm really seeing that organisation come to life. So their people are in the middle. It's clear they're doing work. It tells a story in that organisation. I know St. Petrox, this is a shared household. They're all in it together. Whole Again Communities are clearly cooking something in a kitchen. So I've already got a snapshot of them. A huge thing, I suppose, with our work is that consent. Informed consent in photography means a person knowingly and willingly agreeing to be photographed and understand how the photos will be used and having the freedom to say no without consequences. often in my life, I suppose someone goes, oh, can I take this picture of you? And you go, oh yeah, sure. But I never know where that photo may go. So just being very transparent of how that could be used. Um, and painting that in a light of, well, this is going to go to our funders so they can see the incredible work that's been done. And leaving that chance to say no. It's not just about getting a signature, but ensuring the subject understands the project. And then we also get a lot, because work is with vulnerable people. It's then we can tend to get a lot of reports that then don't have any photos, and oh well, none of them will have consent and various things. So there are ways to take photos and show your story by still remaining that confidentiality. So links there to look at consent, and some tips, I suppose, of photography that we've had that can work and ways that you can show that impact through photography. So it might be backshots, silhouettes. I love this one on the top right because it very much tells that story of you can see the positivity and the happiness in that with the rainbow. And it's still got people at its centre. I don't know who those people are, but it doesn't matter. I can still feel the story. And the community connection of the left one. So don't worry if you can't get someone's face in there. I mean, I'm an ex-primary school teacher, and we had children that didn't have consent in various ways, and we would talk, okay, well, can we show a back of the head? Can we show a silhouette? So that they're unidentifiable. Partial framing and blurred faces. You can see it's a lot with different children here, but actually I can still see the activity going on. I can still see the project and what it's all around. But again, it's less identifiable. Wide shots are great because actually sometimes when it's outside work like this, you've got lovely scenery and we know where you work. I know that's around sailing, and I know that it's working with nature and perhaps photography there. So there are still ways to tell the story. And you can always share that with us of actually this photo is here and we've obscured this view for this reason. And again, just linking back to ethical photography, this photo always makes me smile because it's so joyful. I can still tell the story of what's happening. And ultimately it's ethical because it's respecting the dignity, rights, safety and agency of the people being photographed. It means thinking not only about getting a good image, but about the impact that image may have on individuals, communities and how they're represented. I'd love to be represented in that way, of that smile and joy. And that may not be what's present in every session, but capturing those moments is wonderful. And then that final strand, we've looked at the story of change, how you can show through an individual and tell that story, how you can tell that story through photography. And ultimately, we love photography because we can then show in our sort of communications what it is like, and as can you. If someone hasn't got time to read an impact report, they can see the work you do through a photograph. But sometimes it can be you need more of a framework to guide how you complete your end of grant reports, how you show your impact. And it doesn't have to be arduous. It doesn't have to be another lot of sort of forms to create. So an impact framework is a nice tool to be able to define how your organisation creates change and then how it measures the difference that it makes. If you're aware of your outcomes and your activities, then it provides a sort of guide to your impact. A common one is something called the theory of change. Now, I'm not going to talk through ins and outs of everything, just something to, if you haven't already got this established, and some of you may, I may be just repeating myself, but having that sort of guide in a theory of change can show, okay, what's the problem you're trying to solve? What activities do you do to address that? And what do you then produce? And from the changes people experience in that, what long-term difference might it make? And why you believe this pathway makes sense. So setting out your path of your why. There's lots of different models I've popped on there. And NCVO is a great sort of resource to be able to look at different frameworks, what might work for you. I'm a visual person, so this helped me visualize where I might change. So at the bottom, we've got those activities. Okay, what do you do? What is your bread and butter? And then what are your outcomes? To be able to see the outcomes, okay, what indicates to me what's coming out of that? From your outcomes, what then indicates the impact, and how do we show the impact? Well, often by doing your reporting. But if you haven't got that guiding line, that's when you can come to an impact and think, okay, what did we actually do? How do we know that? So think of an impact framework as not this additional admin task that you have to tick off the list. It's a tool to help you understand what works, what doesn't, and how you're going to implement that lasting change and impact. Serve as a little roadmap for how you'll measure your impact and how you'll implement this through the project. If you've got that already ready to go by the time you've submitted your application, then you get the go ahead where you know exactly where you're going to go and how you're going to align that. How you might do it through. This is just some quick ideas. You may think, Shannon, I've already done all of these, but there may be some that you haven't thought through. Of course, you've got your classic quantitative data. You're doing your surveys. For that best to work, I'd say that pre and post survey. That can be done in so many ways. I know an organisation that have a sort of screen that the young people will come into, and they'll select an emoji, a face coming into that session, and then they also click an emoji on the way out of the session. One click, easy to do, and then you've got sort of that quantitative survey. Attendance records, of course, being able to gather up who came, how many people were there, very quantitative. They might have a ranking system, so how they felt beforehand and how that might rank below. An evaluation wheel, there's examples of that in the link that I've sent, but actually it's a very visual tool for many people. Then you've got your more qualitative, I suppose, very clear interviews. Again, biggest success is that pre-post in the middle. Focus groups, if you've got a certain demographic that you want to really focus on. Case studies, that story of change. Suggestion boxes, I think, is always a really quick one, and something that is, when it's more anonymous, is always more accessible. And then your simple observation. Observation is the easiest, quickest tool. But if you've got that theory of change where you know what you're observing and what you're looking out for, fab. And then there's more creative ones. I'm a bit of a creative mind. And I suppose we don't see a lot of that evidenced. Nothing better than sometimes if we got an end of grant report and it's got a handwritten poem by one of the individuals of how they feel. That speaks volumes and sets you out from the crowd, I suppose, of monotonous end of grant reporting. Well, actually, if you've got some visual drawing, a video diary, a collage a young person's made, different body mapping, so actually how different feelings are, and things like that. Storytelling, journaling, poem, fabulous. Performance, songs, role plays. And it may be that some of the vulnerable people you work with may be more inclined to be more forthcoming with their emotions if it's in a different way and it doesn't feel like this is now going to be a stat or a quote that is taken. So overall, I think the checklist of what I'd want to leave you with of what CCF are looking for in their impacts is that this end of grant report is a chance to tell your story. It's not this all quick admin task I've got to do, because yes, it is a task to complete, but as much as it's a task to ensure that you can get further funding later, it's a chance to tell your story. We create so many case studies and show the work that you do after these end of grant reports. So we want them to be really rich. Work should then be centered around consent and ethical storytelling, and how we can really empower the people that we work with. Good quality photos bring a story to life. These should be empowering, with beneficiaries safely at the focus, and to be celebrated. An impact framework could work, such as the theory of change can act as that roadmap when assessing impact. They can be as complex as you want. They don't need to be super complex. They're really your resource to then guide. It could be something you then give to different volunteers that are also observing impact. They've got a real shared roadmap to go with. And that data can be a mixture of things. It can be that quantitative, number-based thing, but we don't always, yes, we want some of that. But we also want that qualitative, that story of change, that voice, and different creative methods. They're just going to help you stand out and can be different time-saving factors too. The form itself looks like this. For those that haven't completed a form before, of course, they will differ for many different groups, but this is our own. And I really wanted to focus on that introduction part, that we hope this monitoring process offers you a meaningful opportunity to look back on your work, recognise what went well, and consider what you might do differently in the future. It is okay to say if things didn't go quite as you expected, as long as you're looking at it with a focus of how could we go try this differently, rather than that went wrong. That's it, you know. Your insights help build a stronger picture of what's working across the sector. If we know what worked and what didn't, it gives us an understanding of the sector too. And we're generally grateful for the time and care you put into this. The knowledge we gain from your monitoring and evaluation is incredibly valuable. The information you share throughout this form helps us celebrate achievements, share good practice, and shape our future support more efficiently. It's a resource for both of us. Please remember to include photos as attachments. A photo speaks 1,000 words. Please note, completing this form, including providing evidence of how the grant was spent, is a requirement. So yes, there's that requirement, but there's so much more to it. General info, to begin with, a budget breakdown of actually, okay, what did we spend it on? And then always a difficult one is getting some of that into 100 words. So we're actually not asking for essays of work. We're trying to get it into 100 words. So it's making those words count. And so that's certainty around things, not that fluffy stuff of we might have done this. What impact are you really going to show? And then information about the amount of people, how many volunteered. So you're going to have to be collecting that data. If you don't know how many people benefited from your work, you can't go back and try and ask all of them. What beneficiaries? Again, that's going to be something that if you've got a theory of change, you know exactly who your beneficiaries were. Yes, you can look back on your initial form, but if everyone's got an understanding of it, the better. And of course, then it's got to get a bit more nitty gritty. We ask for that impacts and outcomes. So it's only 3 questions of 100 words each, but making those 100 words richer. So in the next session, you're required to report on the outcomes, share the results. So what difference has the grant made to the lives of service users and the wider community? Were there any unintended or unexpected changes as a result of the funding? So we're really getting you to say there if anything wasn't expected, and that can be positive. And then again, that please provide, we've put one personal story of change, but that could include several people. If you think, oh gosh, there's so many changes, yes, try and focus it, but you can deliver more than one voice. Demonstrate how you've made a significant difference. And the supporting documentations, we're trying to make it super clear in bold. We love to see your photos of the project to help bring your impact to life, especially if we're on Jerry's side, if he's got a jam-packed list of photos of groups and the empowering side of it, it's only going to encourage donors to contribute to that success. They might not have all the time to read all these different reports, but if we've got a visual report to show that, that's only going to help. And yep, your declaration, confirm you've read and understood the information and that you give permission for your supporting evidence to be used for CCF marketing purposes. So that's where that consent element's going to come in. Awaiting feedback. We originally were going to do this session once we had a new database in place. So we've been waiting for a little bit for an update to our CRM system that's then been delayed. But I really thought, no, let's do this now, because then it will allow us to make that system better. So after today, if you think, hold on, that impact report didn't hit this or hit that, or I'd like to be able to explain this, pass on some feedback, because our form will look a little bit different once that CRM system's in place. But if we can capture more of your voice of how to shape that as well, that would be fabulous. So that's the look of the form. It will look a little bit different, but if we can make those adaptations or changes, give you feedback, be fab. And also introducing this because we are developing a grant reporting guidance, so a document in which you can take that. It'll probably have lots of the information from today. So a resource is incoming, but if there's any feedback that you have, we can put that in there too. Resources for you to look at. Again, I'll send these slides so you've got something to explore. And this is me. Lots of different support available. If there's anything after today you think that I need more discussion around that, you can always book a one-to-one support session with me if you want to discover more about what funds we have, how we can help. Signing up to our newsletter is always really good because you'll get updates of different workshops, of funds that are opening. Join a workshop, fantastic, you've done one, but there's lots out there. And I'll also send you a link to any past recordings of workshops we've done. And I do drop-in sessions around the county every month. So some of you might have met me in person, but you can certainly do. So we'll go to questions. I'll stop recording. Sorry, it's a whistle-stop tour. And we can really then delve into any questions you have. But thank you.